He brought a frying pan. That was it. No money, no authority, no invitation. A 50-year-old man, recently released from prison, showed up at his daughter's college dormitory with a frying pan and cooked her roommates steak dinners. Within a year, he owned their lives. His name was Larry Ray, and what he did inside one of America's most prestigious universities for nearly a decade, nobody saw coming, because nobody thought to look. Sarah Lawrence College sits in Bronxville, New York, 40 minutes north of Manhattan. Small, private, elite. The kind of school where students come to find themselves. In the fall of 2010, a group of freshmen moved into the dormitories and began building their lives. They were bright. They were curious. They were exactly the kind of people who believed the best about everyone they met. One of them, a young woman named Talia, asked her roommates if her father could stay for a while. He had just been released from prison. He had nowhere to go. They said yes, because why wouldn't they? He was someone's father. Larry Ray cooked them steak dinners. He taught them lessons from the Marines. He told them stories about working for the CIA and his connections to government officials. He was interesting. He was attentive. He listened in a way most adults never did. One student later described the early days. Everyone at the beginning thought he was weird, she said. And then one by one he would get them alone, have these conversations, and suddenly they're like, oh, he's not so bad. That was the entry point, one private conversation at a time. What happened next follows a pattern so precise that forensic psychologists who studied the case described it as a textbook example of coercive control at scale. First, he made himself indispensable. He became their advisor, their mentor, their confessor. He held what he called therapy sessions, long, late-night conversations where he encouraged students to share the most vulnerable parts of themselves, their fears, their insecurities, their family histories, their secrets. He listened to everything and filed it away. Then came phase 2. Ray brainwashed 7 victims into falsely confessing that they had caused him and his family harm. He then used those fraudulent statements to control them and make them pay him for the made-up transgressions. He was extraordinarily skilled at this. He convinced one student that she had repressed memories of poisoning him with a cleaning product. She had no memory of doing this, because she hadn't done it. But after enough hours of sleep deprivation and psychological pressure, she believed it. She confessed to it, on camera, and then she owed him. Through his manipulation and abuse, Ray extracted false confessions from victims to causing purported damages to him and his family and associates. The victims then made payments by draining their parents' savings, opening credit lines, soliciting contributions from acquaintances, and selling real estate. One family paid him $200,000 and sold their house to cover the rest, because their children had confessed, on camera, to things they never did. The control extended to every part of their lives. He isolated them from outside friends and family. He convinced them they had repressed memories of childhood trauma. He taught them to trust his words over their own senses. He determined what they ate, when they slept, who they were allowed to speak to. Students who had arrived at college with full scholarships and bright futures were now living in a one-bedroom Manhattan apartment with a 50-year-old ex-convict who controlled every hour of their day. And they believed they had chosen this. That is what makes this case unlike almost anything else in the psychological literature. He didn't lock them in. They stayed, because he had replaced their own judgment with his. The false confessions were not just psychological leverage, they were insurance. Larry Ray filmed the sessions. He kept the recordings. If any victim started to pull away, started to question him, he had documentation of their confessions ready to release. Confessions to crimes they never committed, documented, time-stamped, ready to destroy them. One victim described what it felt like to be in possession of a confession you know is false, but cannot take back. She said it felt like being buried alive. You can see the surface. You just cannot reach it. By 2011, Ray had moved the group out of the dormitory and into a Manhattan apartment, then to a property in North Carolina. The geography changed. The dynamic did not. For nearly a decade, he extracted money, labor, and complete psychological submission from a rotating group of young adults. His tactics included sleep deprivation, psychological humiliation, verbal abuse, threats of violence, alienating victims from their families, and exploiting their mental health vulnerabilities. One woman spent years under his control. She had arrived at Sarah Lawrence College at 18. By the time the FBI became involved, she had lost the years she was supposed to use to build her life. The case only came to light almost by accident. A journalist working on an unrelated story reached out to a former student. That student spoke, then another, then another. In February 2020, federal agents arrested Larry Ray at his home in New Jersey. He was 60 years old. Sarah Lawrence College told investigators they had no record that Larry Ray had ever lived on campus. He had lived there for an entire academic year, in a dormitory, with 18-year-olds, and nobody had a record of it. At trial, the evidence was overwhelming. Victims testified about the false confessions, the financial extortion, the years of psychological control. One victim described the moment she realized what had happened to her. Not the moment of arrest, not the moment of trial, but a quiet moment years later when she tried to make a decision, a small, ordinary decision, and realized she had forgotten how. He had made the decisions for so long that the mechanism inside her that made choices had gone quiet. She had to learn it again from the beginning. In April 2022, Larry Ray was convicted on 15 counts: sex trafficking, extortion, racketeering, forced labor, money laundering. In January 2023, he was sentenced to 60 years in prison. The judge at sentencing underscored the resiliency of the human spirit and the courage of the victims. Ray is scheduled to be released on March 29, 2071. He will be 111 years old. He will not be leaving. What the forensic experts who studied this case kept returning to was not the violence, not the extortion, not even the false confessions. It was the steak dinners, the beginning. The moment a 50-year-old man with nothing walked into a dormitory with a frying pan and was welcomed because he was someone's father. Because these students were 18 years old and kind and believed that a person in need deserved a chance. Their kindness was the entry point. Their trust was the weapon he used against them. Ray used classic techniques of coercion, isolating people from their friends and family, financial control, removing basic human agency like food and sleep. But the foundation of all of it was the steak dinner, the conversation that felt like care, the adult who seemed to finally understand them. That is what he found in that dormitory, not victims. Students who deserved better than what walked through their door. The question this case leaves behind is not about Larry Ray. It is about the conditions that allowed him to operate for nearly a decade inside the lives of educated, intelligent young adults at one of America's most respected institutions. He had no authority, no title, no role. He was a guest who never left. And for 10 years, nobody made him. If this case stayed with you, share it with someone you trust. And if you want more cases like this one, subscribe. A new case drops every Thursday. I'll see you in the next one.